You're all set.
That's great. Thank you, Debbie. Good evening. It's 7 p.m. Today is, that's a good question. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd. I'm Fred Chase, and I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Rules and Procedures Committee of the Bridgewater Town Council. There are really two items on our agenda this evening. First is just the approval of minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on March 16th, 2023. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Fred, they can't motion or approve because they weren't on the committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right? Were they on the committee?
In
Yeah, it
March,
says my
yes.
name's there.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
And there's one typo near the end. I don't have it in front of me, but it says Counselor Chase Lindy motion for something. I believe it was me that was, but
oh, really? Okay. Well,
it
if
looks
we
like it
could
was
ask
like a carryover.
if you could, Debbie, just make a note to look at that and make an appropriate correction.
I certainly will.
And subject to that, I would entertain a motion for approval.
I'll motion to approve.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I think I have to abstain. I was not there.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, then you should abstain if you were not at that meeting. Okay,
That's
I
correct.
will second the motion for approval of the minutes, subject to the change that Councilor Lindy has just informed us about. And so then if Mark, you and I could vote in favor if we approve, I approve.
Approve.
Okay, very good. So that the minutes have been approved for that meeting on the 16th of March. The item of business for us tonight is order FY 23-049. It's entitled Adoption of Town Council Social Media Policy. And as I noted just a few minutes ago, this was actually introduced by Sean George on the 21st of February, 2023. During the meeting just prior to that, earlier in February, he introduced the subject during a discussion that took place in the council, and he indicated the need for it. I was speaking prior to our meeting, just very briefly, with Councilor Lindy about the history of this. I did send early in February a list of resources to Councilor George. These were, resources I had compiled by doing a little searching online myself as to what would be useful models or examples of useful guidance for the preparation of a policy. I don't know, quite frankly, because I haven't had the discussion with Councilor George about this, to what extent, if at all, he utilized these sources. What I do think is that what he's presented is actually a very comprehensive policy, and I think it touches on all the really important issues for the council members to be aware of. Certainly topics like the open meeting law and the public records law, and of course he speaks about the need to honor the constitutional rights of First Amendment rights of citizens when we're conversing with them through social media. So one of the sources I had found that I did suggest to Councilor George was actually produced by the Mass Municipal Association. And you might remember, and I know that Councilor Lindy and I attended an online seminar that was being conducted by Mass Municipal. It turned out to not be exactly on point for our purposes. That particular seminar back in, it might have been the beginning of March or so, somewhere around there, actually focused on a social media policy for a town itself. And what we're looking at here is what would be a proposed social media policy for individual members of our town council. Now, we've not been asked to draft a policy for the town. That's not what this is. This is simply a policy of recommended procedures and practices for use by individual counselors who, if they choose to utilize social media in connection with their official council duties or in connection with election matters, that they should consider adhering to these policies for the purpose of really protecting themselves. The very short story that shouldn't really be news to anyone is that because of the contentious environment that we live in, I think that most anything that is said in a public venue by a public official is subject to all kinds of responses, many of which are not necessarily productive and may not be necessarily, quite honestly, they may not be very useful. Some of them are strictly intended to derail a conversation, frankly. But nonetheless, people do have a constitutional right to participate in any public venue. And that's what we create when we as public officials engage in social media conduct. We are making a public forum for discussion. I see your hand up, Councilor Lindy. Did you want to make a point or ask a question?
Let me unmute. Didn't mean to leave it off, and I'll put the video on. I know that quite possibly this committee could change after the new president is elected. And I would like to actually slow this down a little bit and allow for members of rules and procedures that will be on. I intend to ask the council president if I can be reappointed, but it's up to him whether I am or not. And one way or the other, I'll come to the meeting and make my thoughts be heard and then at the council. But we have a brand new counselor that just got elected, who's an attorney, who I'd love to hear his take on this. And obviously, Sean proposed it, so I don't really want to act on it without being able to have a conversation with him. It may not be a fun conversation, but I'm very uncomfortable with this, and I really don't think the council can legislate what we do as private citizens. It really is bothering me. I want to see another town that has this policy, and I want to see what's happened with it. I've been very careful with what I've done on social media. We've had other councilors that haven't. I'm going to continue to be careful. I also run the 02324 page for the town, not for the town, but for the community. And I worked in public access television for almost 39 years, and we were freedom of speech, no censorship. Anybody can say what they want. Official duties are not. You don't represent yourself as a counselor when you're out there. If I were a town employee, and I know we're a special municipal employee, but if I were actually a town employee under the direction of the town manager, you can write any policy you want. But I'm an elected official, elected by the public, and I do not think just because one council wants to have this policy in place, honestly, I'm going to find out more, because I just don't feel comfortable with it. I stated it right up front at the council meeting, and I want to know more. I want to get more legal information about it. And if it costs us to get that, so be it. But I truly don't feel comfortable with this. So if I could make a motion, I would table it. If anybody would second that for discussion, and maybe we can do that. If not, I'm just not comfortable with it. So just being very, very clear right now.
Okay, well, before we get into any action in that regard, let me just say that I've spent considerable time looking over Sean's proposal. And I've compared it with the number of sources that I refer to, and there were probably 6 or 7 sources, one of which included the American Civil Liberties Union. All of the sources that I looked at, which included, there were a couple of towns, I didn't pay particular attention to the towns, but I paid special attention to, for example, what Copeland and Page urged, what Mass Municipal urged, and what the American Civil Liberties urged. Because what the policy is really intended to do is not to restrict, frankly, anyone. In other words, one of the big takeaways of this policy, and it comes through in several different sections of the document, is to permit the public to speak, and to not, for example, delete comments from the public that we as counselors may think is, are offensive or, taking us in a different direction than maybe we prefer to see, if it's some matter of public policy, to urge that counselors do not delete comments, because that is removing speech from a public venue. And that could be an actionable, item. Some people could bring forth an action based on that. And it would not be an action that the town would be able to, it would be in any position to defend us. If we're doing it as individual counselors on our personal social media pages, we bear the full responsibility for what we say or what we do. And that's the whole point of this. It's to give counselors a little bit of a chill up their spine if they use social media, that they can't delete comments, they can't block people, they can't really hide comments, or otherwise remove from that public venue that they created in their Facebook or whatever media page it is. The public has a right to speak. So it really is intended to preserve every right that the public has, and to urge, and it's really simply a matter of urging, that's all we can do, urge individual counselors to be extremely cautious about what they do and say, and particularly not to prohibit someone else's free speech. There are other items.
Hey, Fred?
Yes. Susie?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
May I ask a question? Is Facebook considered public domain? Because it's Meta, which is not government property or public property.
Okay, so it's a private company, meaning it's not government. It is publicly owned, but that doesn't make it, how can I say? Facebook, Meta, if you will, is a publicly owned company. Okay.
Right. No. This is exactly why I'm questioning it, because I'm like, it is, when we are present on social media and we, open up a channel or some kind of forum or a discussion, whatever, is that considered public domain in terms of protected by constitutional rights? I think that's the first fundamental thing, is my question.
When we do that as public officials, we're creating a public forum. If
Okay.
we're discussing public policy matters, we're talking about things before the council, or we're communicating with citizens in Bridgewater who are our constituents. These are our official duties. So when we do that as a publicly elected official, we are creating a public forum for discussion.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Mark?
351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. My question is, How many of them have a social media policy? I just want more information. And even though this came up before, I haven't researched it like you have, Fred. I do have a contact at the ACLU who I haven't spoken to in a while, if they're still there. I'm new to all of this. The Mass Municipal Association, unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to their convention, and that seminar really wasn't all that worthwhile. They just had another one and they were pretty much doing the same thing. And I
That's
decided
right.
not to go to it because I had a class that ended, and my mother, what happened with my family. So I am not trying to kill it just because I don't agree with it. I want to study it properly, and I'm not trying to send it to the committee on bills in the third reading like the legislature does, but the legislature does not have a social media policy. The city council in Brockton doesn't have a social media policy, and I want to know more information. So
Okay.
I also do think, honestly, I don't know what the next council president's appointments are going to be. So this is the last meeting we're going to have before we send it to council. And I don't think it's been discussed enough. I don't think it's been studied enough. So I just want to, it's just what I want to do. So I will make a motion to table it. I don't know if anybody will second it or vote for it, but I'm going to make that motion.
Okay, so there's a motion to table this, which, just for clarity, means that we would have no further action on it tonight. We would report back to the council, if this is what you each choose to do, that we elected to table the matter and take no discussion, take no action on it at all. So the motion is brought forward. Is there a second?
No.
I prefer to not second that motion.
Okay.
Now, I think I understand what you're saying, Mark. I don't have answers to the particular questions you asked. What number of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts have adopted a social media policy? I do know that it's becoming far more prevalent than any time in recent years. Now, you made reference to the second Mass Municipal Association seminar that was scheduled for last Thursday. I think it was
Right.
Thursday in
Yes.
Worcester.
Yes.
I signed up for it. As it turned out, I could not make the trip to Worcester that evening. It would have been between like 6 and 8 p.m. To do that. I did, however, receive a document. It's a slide set from that presentation. So now I have, I don't know, if before I had 6 resources, now I have 7, something like that. And what, unfortunately, about that particular meeting, it was, unlike the meeting several months ago, it was really keyed for city and town councils, because it was the Councilors Association.
Okay.
It's a separate unit within Mass Municipal
Okay.
that put that one together. So unfortunately, I was not able to do it. You were not able to do it. Again, I do have the slide deck, and I'm happy to share that. Now, I think Susie, if I'm right, I think I sent to you, and if I'm right, I think I sent to both of you a summary of the resources that I looked at, just citations to the particular websites and whatnot. That do you each remember receiving that? There was a half a dozen of them just on a sheet of
Yeah,
paper.
I do remember receiving it. I haven't looked at it recently.
Okay. Quite honestly, and again, the ones that I referred to more than anything were Mass Municipal, ACLU, and Copeland and Page. And there are others there that I'm less familiar with. There's the Knight Institute for the First Amendment, or I forget the full name of it, which looks like a very authoritative source for material on the subject. And there were some city and town from Massachusetts examples of policies in place. My original hope was that, knowing that Sean George was probably going to prepare a proposal, was that he might look at one of the particular existing city or town policies in effect and use it as a model and go from there. And quite frankly, again, I don't know. He may have done just that in producing this, but I haven't had that discussion with him. I always just think it's far better to start with a good model of something and tinker with it rather than just sit down at a bare pad of paper and go to town. So nonetheless, in my opinion, and having looked at this now for a few weeks, I've gone through it fairly extensively, and I've actually given to Debbie a red line where I have marked it up. And what I would say about it, just in as few words as possible, is I don't think that I deleted anything from Sean's original work. I did add some clarifying material and some somewhat expansive material on particular points, just to really further make clear kind of the hazards for public officials of social media use in terms of this point of not traipsing on someone's civil rights, some citizen's civil rights. One thing that's happening in a lot of cities and towns in Massachusetts and elsewhere, people are conducting so-called First Amendment audits, and individuals will show up at town officials' offices, camera in hand, and they'll confront public officials doing their job, and they will just video for, in some cases, hours at a time while they're questioning an official about what they're doing, how they're performing their job. This is just an example of the kind of scrutiny that public officials generally, not just in Massachusetts, but pretty widely, are experiencing today. And in terms of social media, it's just far more contentious than I have ever seen it in the past. I'm speaking about particularly in the last couple of years, let's say. I don't maintain a Facebook account for the primary reason that my temperament would not be a good mix for that. Okay, and I know that. So I don't want to put myself at risk either of facing unexpected litigation or facing an angry person with a gun at my door. Just not going to do that. I communicate with residents in a variety of ways, the same ways that I'm sure each of you do, except not on social media, but by telephone and by email and by faces on the street. I talk to more neighbors about town issues when I'm walking my dog 2 or 3 times a day. I'll go out for a 10-minute walk around the block to, walk my dog. I'll come back an hour and a half later and my wife will wonder, where did you go? Oh, I ran into John and he wanted to talk about water quality or whatever the case may be. So I do a lot of that. And I have an advantage that I think neither of you do. I am retired and I have the ability to devote time to that. But I choose not to use social media in connection with my official duties as a counselor. The people who do are perfectly welcome to. This is just intended to be guidance for them. Now it's up to you. I was planning to propose that we look at the edits that I've made, and I guess I would want to know that each of you want to spend time doing that.
I'd certainly like to look at it. I just want to spend more time on this. and get more information. I appreciate what you've done. I'd love to see those slides. Again, not knowing whether Sean took his policy from another community's policy and not having that information, for me, it's hard for me to go for. I'll be glad to look at anything. Again, I still think I don't know, you know, I don't know if Susie wants to stay here. I don't know if you want to stay here, Fred. I don't know what the president's going to do. It may be a moot point. And I guess my question is, does it matter whether we act on it tonight or we have the next council meeting and see where it goes with the other committee? Even if it's not tabled, I want more information. I'm not going to get all of it tonight. I'll get the wisdom that you have, Fred, and whatever Susie, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. Susie has to add, which I'm sure is thoughtful. But, you know, the next step, it goes to the council. Theoretically, it could be voted on Tuesday night. I don't feel comfortable doing it.
Okay, let me say one thing. Debbie knows this, I think, to be true. Sean, who introduced this proposal on February 21st, reached me by email to say that he wants to be sure that we have a quorum to meet tonight to discuss this, because it's his intention, if we do not act on it, that he will, on Tuesday, he will make a motion to have it returned to the full council for consideration there. So if we do choose to not act upon it for any reason, Sean is going to have it make a motion, and I'm sure the votes would be there so that the full council would need to discuss it. So the unfortunate thing about that is, in subverting the committee process, which is what it does, it means that the council is going to have, as you know, a fairly limited amount of time to consider this, because we have a full agenda every meeting, and we certainly will on Tuesday. I know we'll have an executive session planned. I know we have a presentation planned. It's going to be a long enough evening as it is. And I just don't think that ample time is going to exist in a regular council meeting to go through everything that we have to go through here. That's why I think it's especially important for us to have it at the council level.
That's fine.
At the
I'm
committee
sorry.
level.
That's fine, but I don't really want to say this, but I'm going to.
Okay.
Then maybe Sean should have been here tonight to talk to us.
Well,
Okay. I feel that that's almost a threat from his part to, if we don't do something about it, he's going to bring it up. Let him. I don't like doing things quickly. And I know it sounds like we're not doing things quickly, but this is only the second time that I've had any option to talk about it. So.
well,
just-
and
And
that's it's true for
may I-
all of us.
Sorry.
Yes. Susie?
Can I add something?
Sure.
And Fred, I echo the sentiment. I really appreciate the effort and the work that you have put into, you know, reading his proposal and doing the research. The monkey wrench that I'm going to throw into this is I actually do oppose it. Based on, we are, similar to what Mark said earlier, we are individuals elected by the community. Social media or communication in general is covered by all the rules and regulations as we serve as public officials in general. I mean, that general communications in terms of, you know, open meeting law and, you know, all the code of ethics, et cetera. So whether we're on emails or on social media or in person, we are to adhere to certain levels of conduct. And we as a unit should be writing policies about how for legislation that
For the
is
town.
to benefit the town,
Yeah.
not how we as individuals conduct ourselves. So for those reasons, and also I do believe that Councillor Moore had also brought some very specific examples of why this is not something that's widely adopted or, makes sense. So I'm actually opposed to the proposal with great respect and understanding of Councillor George's intent and, wanting to help protect us. Although I also kind of got the sense from him that there was also some concern about how councilors are conducting themselves, and that is not what we can control as individuals. I can't control how you conduct yourself, Fred. I can't control how Mark conducts himself. I can only control how I do, and it's the same thing, right? That is the unfortunate aspect of being politicians. And so I don't think that this proposal is actually appropriate for what our roles are. And then I also would urge us to look at proposals and ordinances that are truly beneficial to the town and affect the town and the community versus how we conduct ourselves as individuals. So that's my position on this.
Okay, let me say a couple of things just in response. So you make the point that we're covered, so to speak, covered. We need to comply with laws and regulations of the Commonwealth already, including things like the meeting, and you're absolutely correct. This doesn't add anything to what would be a requirement imposed on us. This is putting in front of councilors' eyes the full universe, and frankly, not even the full universe, of laws and regulations applicable to us with respect to our public exercise of our duties as councilors in the public realm. Okay, so it's actually not adding any requirements on us. It's putting in front of councilors' eyes the bad news, like, you should be aware of this. You've got to know this. If you do this, it can be dangerous. Okay, we're trying to protect individual councilors, any individual councilor who utilizes social media.
Then how is it a policy then versus a set of guidance? Do you get what I'm saying? Because a policy to me requires enforcement and check-in points. Yeah.
No, Susie, you are exactly right. In fact, a point I would make to people is that this has come to the Rules and Procedures Committee because this is the appropriate place. If this is adopted, for example, this would be placed in the council rules. It is termed a policy. In fact, it really is no more than guidelines because there's no manner of enforcement mechanism possible. Councilors are going to do what councilors are going to do. Even if we adopted this and everybody had their copy and everyone read it and studied it, people could still go out the next day and absolutely flat out violate everything it says. And they could do that in one session online on social media. And you know what? If they do, they do, because it's whatever befalls them as a result of that is their own personal responsibility. That's what we're trying to drive home here too. The fact that the town is not going to bail us out if we individually run into a problem. If we traipse on someone's constitutional rights, or if we defame someone, or do any number of other things, we're doing so on a social media account that we established when we didn't have to do it, but we did it. And then we went out and we did something wrong. Whatever comes from that is going to be an individual, have an individual impact on that councilor personally.
Exactly.
And the town is not going to defend.
Yeah.
The town won't defend us.
And that's where I'm coming from, where I'm like, I'm not sure then how it's appropriate for this council to then try and govern individual actions of somebody who is acting on free will and is not, and again, to me, it's not a policy, right? It's like, it's all good considerations. Again, not trying to be disrespectful of the content, right? It's like, I understand the spirit and the intent, but it just doesn't feel appropriate for this body to be governing
Well, just, that was one of your other points, and let me just get back to that, okay? No one but we ourselves as counselors can govern what our rules are as a council. We make our own rules. We adopt Robert's Rules of Procedure, but we can also adopt, and we do, special rules that are not part of Robert's Rules of Procedure. Robert's Rules applies to clubs and associations and churches and all kinds of organizations. It's very helpful to run a meeting to understand and use Robert's Rules of Order. But as a council, we have particular concerns, and we have those embodied in our written rules, okay? So we can't, no one else is going to impose rules on us. We have to govern ourselves. So it is appropriate for us to develop policies. In fact, that's in our code. Our administrative code says that we can adopt policies to govern ourselves, because who else is going to do it? Town manager can't do it. We're not answerable to him. Remember, he's answerable to us, okay? The Commonwealth isn't going to do it because the Commonwealth gave us a charter to govern ourselves, okay? We have a home rule charter. So the council adopts its own rules for its own internal governance, and that's part of what this is. And if you study these pages, this is not intended to impose any further burden than already exists on us by law. It's just putting it in front of people in a way that they might not otherwise. People aren't otherwise going to go to the Mass General Laws or go to the Code of Mass Regulations and look things up, or, you know, go to some state office to find out, you know, well, as a counselor, what can I do? What can't I do? Or the Secretary of State's office or any such thing. This simply puts in one place what would be guidance. And it's guidelines. That's what it is. We call it a policy. We could call it guidelines. Maybe that would be a suggestion you want to make to Sean. There is no enforcement. So it really is a question of, you know, we're telling you what's smart to do, counselors. If you don't do it, that's okay too, but it's on you. That's what it is.
I mean,
Can I say
Fred, to be
something
very
finally,
frank,
please?
Sure. Yes, Mark?
I agree with a lot of what Susie said, and no disrespect, Fred, please, but honestly, I think this is like the Kentucky Derby. I know it was proposed in February. I know it was talked about in March. All I'm asking is I want to see a policy from another town that's like us. And I don't feel it's enforceable. I just don't feel comfortable with it. And so I made a motion to table it. Didn't get a second. That's fine. I'm going to make a motion.
Yep.
That we just don't act on it tonight. I'm not, if we do, I'm voting against it.
Okay. All right. So your motion, if I understand, your motion is that we should return it to the council without action, without a recommendation for approval. Just return it to the council as,
Okay. No, okay, then I'll take that back. I'm going to make a recommendation that we do not approve this policy tonight.
okay,
A motion. that
then
we-
I'm second.
okay,
It's not a policy.
Well, that we
So-
do not approve this document this evening.
all right, so we're saying this
Mark,
proposal,
you
this
have to-
proposal,
You have to be more clear. You have to, please.
all right, so if I understand correctly, the motion that you're making is that this proposed order, okay, whether it's a policy or whatever it
Okay,
is,
fine.
it's
It's
a
proposed order.
proposed order, be returned to the council with what? With no action?
No, I'm recommending it unfavorable to the council.
I'm sorry, I think I missed.
I'm
part
going
of
to
it.
recommend it. Okay, so my motion is that we do not recommend this order favorably to the town council.
Okay. All right, so that is the motion. Susie, do you second that motion?
I second.
Okay. All right. So we will put it to a vote. We're going to ask for a roll call vote, please, on that motion to return it without, not recommended for approval.
Correct.
Deb, did you call me?
Nope, just waiting for you guys to vote.
Okay, we're going to do it by a roll call vote,
Oh, you want me to do it? I'm sorry.
if you would.
I was waiting for you to do it. Miss Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes,
Mr. Chase,
No.
2 in favor, 1 opposed.
Okay, so it'll be returned to the council with your recommendation. I was the sole no vote, and I will I'll issue a minority report when we deliver our committee report to the council on Tuesday. So that is it. We have no further business, so I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second? Okay,
I'll motion
All
and
right.
that's fine.
all right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, very good. Then we stand adjourned.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
Fred,
you.
Have a
again,
good night,
appreciate your
everybody.
diligence.
Night, everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Deb.
night.
Night, Mark.
Good night.